Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So, I do understand that it's sometimes difficult to find good games as they do have a tendency of getting buried on the Nintendo eShop. There's just so much choice out there that sometimes these smaller but just overall great games don't necessarily get the recognition that they truly do deserve. Well, we're going to change that today by talking about 12 different hidden gems that you can go out and pick up and play right now on your Nintendo Switch. Now, do keep in mind that all of this is only my opinion, and yours might be entirely different than mine, but I genuinely do think that a lot of these games are worth your time, your money, and just worth a try, because they really are that good. With that out of the way, though, let's just go and get right into it. So, to start off this list, I have a relatively new release being Elechead, and I think that if you like puzzle platformers, this one needs to be on your radar. Now, this entire game centers around a relatively simple core mechanic where you play as a little robot and whatever he touches, electricity will then run through them. That can be a number of different things from platforms, walls, switches, etc., and he can also remove his head for a short period of time as well. It's a pretty simple mechanic to understand, but it's the way all of this is used that is just so utterly genius. It's fully explored with clever new ideas throughout its entire playthrough. I'd say that's really probably the only downfall of this game, as it is a pretty short game. Depending on how fast you can complete its puzzles, it seems on average that most users take about 3 hours to complete Elechead. Even then though, I still would say that this game is well worth it at just $10 on the Nintendo eShop. The combination of atmosphere, fun combat, and pressure to complete an objective is exactly what you're going to get with Unsighted. Ironically, not near enough people have this game within their sights, but let's kind of change that today. Unsighted is a top-down action-adventure game that takes inspiration from games like Zelda, CrossCode, and even Hyper Light Drifter with its fast and dynamic combat. But where this game really separates itself is in the urgency that it makes you feel. Now, the reason for this is because you and everybody else on this planet have a limited amount of life force before they end up losing their conscience forever and become the quote-unquote unsighted. That means that not only are you in danger, but also every NPC can die in this game, unless you have meteor dust in which you can prolong life just a little bit longer. So in other words, if you like that NPC that sells you items, well, you might want to keep them alive. But in doing so, that also means that another NPC might have to die instead. As you can see, tough decisions can be a part of this game, again, really leaning into that sense of urgency. It's a unique idea, though, that pays off depending on the type of challenge that you seek. I don't think that I would have ever believed that a combination of the monster capturing genre and a Metroidvania game would work out so well. But then came along Monster Sanctuary, and it really kind of made me realize just how untapped this genre still is. It does work like a typical 2D Metroidvania as you'd expect with platforming and exploration, but then it also has monster capturing, where you partake in 3 versus 3 turn-based battles and exploit each other's weaknesses. The combat itself is done very well with lots of strategy, and there's lots of ways to build out each character through different moves and evolutions. There's even PvP if you want to go down that route. But one cool thing about this game was that the monsters can actually help you explore and interact within the environment. That's kind of where the Metroidvania exploration comes in, where you can use their different abilities outside of battle. I'd say with this game, it might not necessarily have the best presentation in the world, but it does have surprisingly in-depth and fun gameplay. One of my favorite genres growing up was the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy. I still hold those games in such high regards all these years later for so many different reasons that I'm not going to get into this video, but interestingly enough, one independent game that was highly inspired by the Donkey Kong Country franchise turned out to be one of the better platformers that's released in recent years, being Kaze and the Wild Masks. Really, I would say the most important things in a 2D platformer are in how they feel, and then the level design. Well, I'm happy to say that in both cases, Kaze absolutely excels. The controls are tight and responsive, and there's plenty of environments to play in. You even have different masks in this game that can give you different animal powers, which not only changes in how the game is played, but because there's so much variety, it never feels stale. Now, Kaze doesn't necessarily offer much of anything that's completely new to the genre, but what it does offer is an overall fun game that's a blast from the past. With some games out there, you can just kind of feel that the developers poured their hearts into the game. And that really comes off here in a very overlooked game being What Lies in the Multiverse. On the surface, this game seems like a pretty straightforward puzzle platformer. You shift dimensions to solve its various puzzles. But this can range quite a bit in how it actually affects the environments, which kind of keeps you guessing. The puzzles overall, though, are done quite well, and I'd say for that reason alone, it's a fun game. But it also has a compelling story on top of that. At times it can be humorous, but just like that, with a flip of the switch or a flip of its dimension, it can also be dark or even touching. If anything, I would say What Lies in the Multiverse is full of surprises in the best way possible. What if a first-person arena shooter was instead a platforming speedrunner? And it also combines all that with a bit of a card game as well, which acts as your weapons and abilities when discarded. It all sounds like a rather strange combination on paper, but while Neon White takes on that challenge, and just like its aggressive art style, it just simply works. It does have relatively simple mechanics as you're put on small short-based levels and are tasked to complete them as fast as you possibly can. But mastering the mechanics and figuring out how to best your previous run is just as much of a joy as it is a rush. Even when you best your own time, there's still this sense of, well, hang on, I can still do this just a bit faster. It's almost addicting to a degree, and I think that's a real testament on just how fun Neon White can be. Nintendo fans, they know the Pikmin franchise very well, and it's hard not to think about that franchise when talking about the Wild at Heart. The Spritlings in this game are very clearly inspired by Pikmin, with each group of Spritlings having their own unique abilities that can be used in either combat or to solve its various puzzles. They even look similar to Pikmin in a lot of ways. But even with all of those similarities, the Wild at Heart is still its own thing, and just like its name, it has a lot of heart. I really felt that the story and the characters within this game was endearing and just a treat to see how it all played out. I think almost immediately I was drawn into its magical world. It's also more of an adventure game, with you being able to explore an almost Metroidvania-like world with backtracking and all that good stuff. I just absolutely love that element and its various puzzles that are thrown your way. Now, its combat is rather simplistic and everything, but it still gets the job done, and I think that every other aspect of this game was just done so spectacularly well. To put it short, I would describe the Wild at Heart as a pure and magical joy. Now, if you're just looking for more of a good story, one of the best recommendations that I can possibly make would be 13 Sentinels. Now, in a lot of ways, this is more of a visual novel type of a game following a group of characters through more than a century of time traveling. The way this works is that you can play through different character storylines at the pace you want to, as long as you've unlocked certain criteria to advance their story further. Each character has their own agenda and mystery to solve, but it's also linked together in just such a satisfying and even brilliant way. It really does have a captivating story thanks to its mysterious plot that continuously gets better and better the further you dive in. And then the characters are equally as interesting and also well voice acted. However, even though this is more of a visual novel, there's still some gameplay as well with strategy real-time battles. I wouldn't say that it's genre-defining per se, but it's still fun nonetheless. If anything though, if you want to play a game with just gorgeous visuals on your Switch that just pops off screen, and if you want a good story, then look no further than 13 Sentinels. So, I'd say that it's no secret that the Metroidvania genre has just kind of exploded here in recent years with games like Hollow Knight, you have Ori, obviously Metroid Dread, we can't forget about that brilliant masterpiece, by the way, go play it. But one of the better games within this genre is Ender Lilies. This is a dark fantasy with a strikingly beautiful art style, you might even say tragic with a bit of a backstory. It's interesting though because you have this dark world and atmosphere, but your character is like this beacon of light contrasting the background, which I think comes off as quite beautiful, maybe even somber, but it just pops off screen. Luckily though, it plays just as good as its presentation. You take control of different spirits to battle for you, and this game can offer quite the challenge as well. Again, I'd say that this is one of the better releases within its respected genre that does pretty much everything right. Now, the first thing that everybody kind of notices about Eastward is just how beautiful this game is. It's easy to see why with some of the best pixel art ever made, and just the vivid detail in absolutely everything in this game. There was a lot of love poured into this game, but beyond that, there's also a really good game here. In some ways, it feels inspired by the top-down Zelda games and how you can upgrade and gain new abilities to further expand your combat as well as new ways to solve puzzles. Though Eastward is actually more of a linear style game that is very text-heavy with a primary focus on its story and overall journey. But what a journey it is thanks to its atmospheric apocalyptic world, its endearing story, and just charming characters throughout. In that way, it kind of reminds me a little bit of an old-school JRPG. In fact, you can actually play sort of a mini-game within Eastward that's inspired by Dragon Quest. In Eastward, though, you do see the world through John and Sam's eyes, which are basically polar opposites in how they think. It's that father-daughter relationship, but you can really feel how differently they think depending on the situation that they're in. They really play off each other well, and it just adds that much more to the overall world. If you haven't played this game already, though, definitely consider giving it a try. Now, this next game here potentially might actually be my favorite game on this entire list, and that would be none other than Danganronpa. I actually played these games years ago on the PlayStation Vita, and then I actually rebought them on the Nintendo Switch day one as soon as they released. These games, in my opinion, are just worth it for some of the most absurd, captivating, and even demented stories in gaming history. All in all, you can kind of describe these games as whodunit visual novels. There is a gameplay element to them, as I'll kind of talk about here in just a second, but the main focus are the stories and their characters. So I do understand that these games are maybe a little bit more niche, but please do not overlook these games. They are some of the most memorable games that I've had the privilege of playing myself. Nonetheless, though, Danganronpa basically boils down to a group of teenagers that wakes up in an unknown facility with just a few simple rules to follow. In order to escape and be set free, you must kill one of the other members in the facility and then get away with it. However, an investigation will follow, which is kind of where the gameplay comes in, and if they find out who the killer is, the killer will then be executed. Despair is a very heavy theme in these games as you witness your friends betray your other friends. And at the number one spot, I have a game that's criminally been overlooked, being Omori. Upon making this video, the Nintendo Switch version of Omori has 0 critic reviews. I'll go ahead and say that again, 0 critic reviews. I don't know what everybody's doing, but this is one of the best and most unique turn-based RPGs that's released here in recent years. Right away, you can see that this is a unique game in its presentation alone. It sports this self-drawn pencil-like art style that leaves quite an impression, and that is with every part of this game. You quickly kind of realize that Omori is a special game and how emotionally invested it can have you. This is a game that touches on serious and even sensitive issues like depression and anxiety. While it might not appear like it is on the surface, Omori is actually a psychological horror that can be deeply unsettling. Now, it also weaves in upbeat moments throughout its narrative, and the cast of characters are very likable and easy to relate to, but it does dive into darker topics, so you might want to go ahead and prepare for that. And this even makes its way into its combat. It is a typical turn-based RPG, kind of similar to the Mother series in a way, but it does mix in emotional states while battling. It makes things just a little bit different, which is a welcome change-up, but this really is a special game, and I've seen some people even say that it's changed their life. So I definitely would say put this game on your radar if you haven't already. Anyways, though, that's it for this list, but hopefully it helped you find a couple of new games to play. Of course, though, if you found yourself enjoying this video, make sure to hit that bell notification, subscribe, and like button below. That way you'll be able to watch more videos just like this in the future. Until then, peace out.